for a traditional district that's struggling right now, I think my biggest piece of advice would be starting with the social emotional support for students. In Virginia, they released the responsive return plan. And one of the very first things that is in the plan is that when students come back to school, it is not about assessing or anything. It's about doing the social emotional work to make sure that our students are supported and have the resources that they need.
Our young people are growing up in a time of profound crisis. Their world and their futures are unraveling right in front of them. And so the question is, what must we do as adults, as teachers, as parents, as caring adults, to support young people in this time of profound crisis in their lives?
We should always be checking to make sure the kids are okay and that everybody is cared for and safe psychologically, emotionally, and physically. This has now become a priority because it's such an extreme situation. But I think what it's really pointing out is this is something we always should have been doing and should be doing. I can speak in the community I work in. We have food insecurity, huge, job insecurity, money insecurity. Will we be able to continue to rent this apartment? I think people who maybe never would have experienced any of those things before are experiencing them now. And so I think those types of traumas and scarcities are really coming to the forefront. If you are worried about your family, about your health, about where you're living, about what you're eating, where you're going, your friends, learning becomes tough. Accessing that part of your brain, accessing higher order thinking, it becomes hard when all of these other things are on your mind and something you're worried about. And so I think this has really made it understandable for a ton of people how hard it is to kind of focus without feeling that safety and that care. Learning is enhanced with SEL. The ability to gain information, access information, and to critically think needs a layer of social emotional learning underneath it for it to be effective. And so oftentimes, even teachers I work with will question, oh, we have to talk about feelings or we have to talk about this and that. But kids have big feelings and they don't know yet what to do with them. The way that we teach a kid to read, if a kid can't read, we don't say, well, read better. We break it down and teach them. If a kid can't control their anger, or if a kid has trouble showing empathy, we don't just say, do it better. But we do say that often. We just say, like, fix it. But oftentimes kids don't have the tools. They don't know. They don't understand what that entails. We often don't even think about the steps we take to control our anger or to how we use our executive functioning. And so if we stop and think how we got there, we learned, we were taught. And so we have to do the same.
I know for a fact as a math teacher, I got the results I got because I had the relationships with the kids. Like the first day of class was not a test, not a quiz, nothing. It was tell me your best math experience, your worst math experience, and what I can do to help. And we sat there and talked about how students had never passed a math class in their life. And I told them, well, we're going to get in this together and I'm going to be the one that's going to support you through this.
If you don't have the skills to persevere, to ask for help, to understand that you might fail before you get it, that class is going to be a whole lot harder. And you might see kids shutting down. You might see kids acting out, goofing off. All these different behaviors often come from not knowing how to navigate some part of social emotional learning.
The first and most important piece, according to our research, is really the relations that we develop with our students.
When school buildings abruptly closed down over the course of the spring, a lot of schools noticed that 20, 30, even 40% of students were not fully connected or engaged with what was going on in the school. So why was that? Well, there weren't existing structures in the school where adults knew particular students and families. At the same time, schools in the Big Picture Learning Network that already had an advisory, that already had advisors and individualized learning plans, were seeing 95% of students on a daily basis logging in, connecting over video chat to their advisory. Well, why was that? Well, they wanted to see each other. They wanted to see their advisor. Their advisor knew them and their family. If they didn't turn up, they were going to get checked in on. And so I think that kind of connectedness, that kind of relationship building is vitally important to make sure that young people are able to stay connected.
Before they can even teach, the morning meetings have taken on a whole new level of importance in this virtual world. It is, do I have eyes on you? Do I see you? Are you okay? Is your family okay? What'd you guys do? How are you doing? All these things that we're now asking about that we don't think about when we have to jump right to our math lesson or ELA or reading this text or that.
Especially in times when school buildings are closed, advisory is a vitally important structure to make sure that educators stay closely connected with young people and their families. If you don't know what's going on in their lives at home, then how can you possibly help them learn?
Get to know each other. I think the more they know about your favorite things too is really fun for kids. And then once you know their hobbies, their interests, their goals, you incorporate that into the lessons. A basic thing is, do you greet the kids in the morning? How do you greet them? And I mean like individually, one at a time. How well do you know them? You need to ask, brothers and sisters, do you have any pets? What's your favorite thing to do? The more you know about the kids and let them tell their stories, kids love to talk. So listen.
I did a silly little trick. I would open up my Zoom call discussions early. I wouldn't do wait for me, and I would just turn my camera off, and it really just warmed my heart. The discussion was scheduled for 8:30, and I had kids at 7:45 waiting at Zoom just for someone to show up to talk. And I just let them, and they would be laughing, they would be dancing, they would say, listen to this song I just heard. They need to talk to each other. And also sometimes it would get kind of silly, and I thought I probably should close this down, except I sensed the need for them to be silly together on Zoom. And so I just let that happen, and I think I'll continue to do that. Just let them be together, accomplishing nothing but connecting to each other.
I even created weekly social work drop-in sessions where we just kind of had a Google Hangout and any kids could come in. And the amount of kids that came just to do show and tell, to play games, to say hi, to be in community, it was so nice to see.
We need to make SLCs, we need to make student learning communities with our students. So we don't want pockets of students always just working by themselves, right? Or attending a synchronous lesson for 30 minutes and then just be left there. So we're trying now to create those student learning communities so that they can do consultancy protocols and pitches to students and just communicate, which of course also helps the real social nature of middle school students, huh?
A concept that one of our teachers did was belongingness buddies, where each student was paired with another buddy that they would do regular texts and check-ins and maybe do schoolwork together over Zoom. And that has been one way to keep students connected. There are teachers who have group roles on Zoom so that students, like one student is a host, another one is a coach, another one is, the note taker, just so that you can keep that engagement and keep students active.
We started a mentoring program in Hopewell where we're asking any parents who feel like their students really need that extra support, that social-emotional support, to really sign up to have an adult within our division mentor them. And it can be anyone from, some of our office staff to our cafeteria workers to teachers. And so that has been a pilot program this summer, and it's definitely very successful so far. Our students are really excited because they want that extra support. They want that connection, those relationships.
I think whenever possible, if teachers can keep electives and clubs, whether it's Model United Nations or some sort of theater group, but we've got to keep the fun in school. We just can't make the online learning just be about academics. So how can we keep some of the routine but fun things that happen in school also happening online? And then lastly, I've loved reading and writing all my life. So I love the idea of establishing reading groups and writing groups that students self-select into, and they can write and get feedback on their writing and read and discuss and all those beautiful things. They can easily turn that content and writing into an online exhibition. So like I envision an online open mic night called like Pandemic Poetry, or I don't know, y'all can think of what you want to call it, but where students perform spoken word and just share their experiences. So there are just so many ways to keep the joy in learning. And I think, we've got to get out of this like, oh, this is horrible for students. Okay, how we are in this situation, how do we make it enjoyable for students? How do we keep this joy of learning?
We started our school year last year completely different. Our teachers weren't allowed to do rules, tests, or quizzes the first week of school. Nothing related. And they had to play games with their kids, get to know you activities. The most noise I've ever heard in a school building was during that first week. And students and teachers said 100% they felt so much better about entering the school year from that place because they really had opportunities to play. And I hate to say it like that because it sounds very simple, but when you get to play with your peers a game, and some of the kids that might have been more reserved got the opportunity to kind of step up and say something, or they were encouraged by their peers on the first day of school to be a member of this community, it changes the way that things happen.
Death is a part of our conversation right now. A lot of people are dying and a lot of people are scared of dying. We're also in a world where we can't use the social traditions we use to grieve. We can't go to a funeral. We can't really sit together in a home or do the things we typically would to feel that sense of closure. And so we need to be creative and we need to allow for the conversation. We don't need to force people to talk about it, but leaving the door open and acknowledging, especially as the adults in the room. And so if you have those fears and worries, you are safe to talk about it here. You are safe to ask questions here, especially if I don't have the answer. It's still okay to ask that question. We'll find it, we'll talk about it, we'll figure it out. And I think that is going to lend to a sense of safety that is so hard to provide right now when we're so far from each other.
The hero's journey narrative is one we talk about every single day. And we use the identity of a hero versus a victim. And so we say, okay, we're in a really hard situation. How can we deal with this heroically instead of becoming victims to it? So what can we do to make life better for someone else? And that, I think, really helped. They already had that identity of we're not victims, we're heroes. We can get through this. It's hard, but we can get through this. This is part of my hero's journey. This pandemic is part of my story. And when am I going to tell my grandchildren about it? So I think, once again, it's that storytelling, that narrative that I think is so crucial for human communities, and human relationships are central to learning.
So when we talk about deeper learning and we're talking about all of the things that students need to master, right? All of these competencies, when you look at the actual deeper learning competencies, so many of them are social emotional competencies, right? Collaboration, academic mindsets, their beliefs in that their efforts can actually make them better as students, right? That they belong in this community. That's all part of social emotional learning. And so if we are really to be successful in creating these environments and creating these learning experiences that make students feel like they're really a part of the work, that they are part of a community, then we need to be cultivating this sense of understanding themselves, the sense of understanding their community, the sense of understanding how do they navigate this world that they are in order to help them to do the real world work that we want them to do. Because that's where the work is, right? It's about how we work as individuals and a community. And so students need a lot of support in explicit social emotional learning, and to know that those are the skills that we value so that they can feel like they're actually doing something, not only to be a better student, but to be a better human.
When you segment out SEL, social and emotional learning, and you don't make that a part of what it means to be a graduate of your institution, or how you prepare people to be adults or to be prepared for work, you do a huge disservice to your population. And so anything that you create, you have to have that as core framework and skills, because the skills of collaboration, the skills of critique, the skills of being a good human being are what they need in a 21st century economy and in a 21st century world.
Technology is just a tool. It's a wonderful tool. We love it. We depend on it. But it really is human relationship that matters even when we're separated. So if teachers and families can think about how to maintain the feeling of deep human connection even separated, I think that's really important.
And that engagement starts with social emotional learning. How are we going in and engaging students and families with check-ins and making it a non-threatening environment? Now I gotta learn on a Chromebook. No, we're just trying to do a face call. Let me look at you. Let me talk to you. Build that relationship, and then students and families may be more likely to engage.
Really connecting on a personal level is really important. And then reaching out to the rest of the school team to be like, here's the plan for these families. How can we virtually support with one-on-one check-ins, one-on-one sessions, having a point person that reaches out so that family doesn't receive 15 calls through the 3 different kids. So one of the ways to really coordinate point of contact, especially in the higher grades, is to have advisories or essentially homeroom teachers, a point person for those kids. One of the biggest struggles kids have as adults is just uncertainty and unexpectedness. And so if you walk into this knowing in 2 weeks, in 2 months, we may have to come back to a digital learning, it's not so scary because it's put out there and it's understood. And so you can also plan with the families. What are you going to put into place in case we do have to go back to digital learning? What do you need from us? How can we set everyone up for success knowing we want to be in school, but there is the likelihood we have to be back to digital learning?
Another thing we're starting is a hotline for parents in the fall, where we're going to have teachers and different people, specialists, coaches, to be on call in the evenings for the parents who may not have access to get the support that they need during the school day. So we're going to have, the ability for them to contact us via email, on Google Meet, in chat, on Facebook Live, or any chats online. So just giving them so many different pathways to say, okay, even when I come home from a long day at work, I know that I can still feel supported. Even when I'm, sick or trying to take care of someone else in my home, or my students just really immediately need help, I feel supported.
I was feeding parents things to read. We gave them ideas. We gave a parent's hero's journey challenge, and it was to do geography dinners, to read a book out loud, to watch a hero's journey movie, to let the child plan a day, a free day, little things like that, just to help them, because you get overwhelmed with all the decisions you have to make and the financial stresses, and suddenly you think, I'm not even being a good parent because I can't give anymore. And so just helping the parents with ideas of things they can do that don't take a lot of energy, I think that helped. But the stress is going to continue. I'm really curious about how the next 6 months will pan out for families. So I think we're going to just try to continue to support parents by lifting them up in their own journey, keeping their child in charge of their learning, because that just builds that space, and just encouraging parents. I think parenting is hard, and we're hard on ourselves. And like just the same with teachers, being forgiving of yourself and being open to there are days where some things just won't get done, and it's okay. I really was encouraging parents not to worry about academics during this time. That will come. I promise you that will come. I think parents just need a lot of encouragement, as do teachers. I think we all just have to take care of each other.
during this time, teachers need to be very clear that they got to be nice to themselves. They've got to honor the truth of themselves. And we are talking a lot about how to keep kids and teachers safe, but we are forgetting about the fact that there's this huge emotional component.
How can I be there for myself as well so that I can pour even more into others? And we as educators don't often give ourselves permission to feel and to really have needs. And now more than ever, everyone is affected. Our families, our co-workers, our administrators, everyone needs more love and self-care and grace and faith.
The core kind of tenet right now of how best to respond as an educator is, whatever you're doing, don't do it alone. Buddy up, team up. Even if it's a buddy on the internet, that you Skype with or whatever, try your ideas out. You don't have to be in the same room necessarily, but by no means should we be any of us trying to go it alone, which is, by the way, our inclination as educators.
It's an amazing silver lining of this whole thing is that all of a sudden we don't have to drive anywhere to meet with anybody, and we've gotten very comfortable with it. So as a teacher, is this not a moment to reach out to somebody who's perhaps in your complex or your district, but not at your school, and to say, what are you doing? What are the steps that you're taking that are a little different than you were doing before? And how could I possibly do those same steps or take those same steps? And by the way, as we do that, could we just sort of stay in touch with each other? Could we coach each other? Could we help each other and sponsor each other, mentor each other and guide each other as we go through it? And so I think that this pandemic moment is very ripe for these kinds of informal networks to pop up. And what's the end result of that going to be is that we all feel a little bit more like a community, and that we're going to survive this pandemic and we're going to be resilient through this pandemic because we know each other. We're talking to each other and we're sharing each other's ideas.